I actually started off doing astrophysics. So you do know much about astrophysics?
No, tell me more. What is that? How did you get into that?
So everyone thinks like astrophysics. I decided to go to Leeds. Got into Leeds Uni. Not a bad university of physics. And I was like, right, I'm going to do astrophysics because I enjoyed stars and space and all that shit. And I was doing it for a year, and I was like, this is the driest shit going. Do you know, like, astrophysics isn't... The interesting shit's cosmology. So, you know, when you think of astrophysics, you probably think of Einstein, Kepler, you probably think of Hubbard, all these people, like age of the universe, the expansion of the universe. When you think of astrophysics, it's not that. It's like the life sequence of a star. It's like when a star is born, what is the sequence it goes through its life before it dies? That's seriously tedious stuff.
Really? What makes you decide to do that instead of all the other options?
So at Leeds, there were 3 options you could do for undergrad, and because I knew I didn't have the grades for a master's straight away, I had to go straight to BSc. But I was like, if I do well first year, I can get straight into an MSc. It's easy. Like, you just do well first year, pull your weight, and then you just switch over. So I started off with astrophysics. Within the first year, I was like, this is boring. This is seriously tedious stuff. So in the second year, I switched over to straight physics, like just pure physics. Got rid of the astro modules because they were just like really, really boring things about stars, like pulsating stars. That's seriously dry stuff when you get to it. It genuinely is. You're looking at like graphs of how the luminosity of a star changes over months. It's just seriously tedious stuff.
What are the options? Run me through the options.
Oh, so the options were astrophysics, straight physics, and then theoretical physics, if I remember correctly. I never did theoretical because I was like, I want some real world application, but also I was like, theoretical is hardcore.
What would you be doing in that?
That's like pure maths. Like my little brother, he did a master's in theoretical physics. I actually proofread his master's for him. And I didn't know a fucking word he was saying. Honestly, I was reading through this was when I was third year PhD, and I was reading through my little brother's master's thesis, and I was like, I can't even do this maths. I was like, I can grammar check for you, and I can make sure the words make sense and in the science way, but I was like, I can't do the maths for you because this is beyond my maths. Yeah, it's serious heavy maths. It's like pure heavy. I mean, some of the best scientists in the world, like Hawkins, Penrose, these are all theoretical physicists. You know, these are the freaking smartest guys. The pure mathematicians, in a sense. They just apply it to space, is the way I see it. So when I was 18, decided I was going to do astrophysics. And then within the second year, I dropped off that and went to straight physics, changed to a master's as well. And then I did a year abroad in Canada, and then I kind of took a bit of a hiatus because I just was like enjoying life. I did study hard and I got a good grade, but physics wasn't my priority then. It really wasn't. But then when I came back, I actually won a summer research placement, a paid research placement with Leeds. So when I came back from Canada, I spent the whole summer after that researching. I did it with the Condensed Matter group. So do you know much about condensed matter?
No, please tell me.
So condensed matter physics is very like thin film magnetism. So it's like semiconductors is thin film is condensed matter physics.
So, say in a way, like in layman terms, because a lot of the viewers will be like,
condensed matter physics basically is, in physics, it's the study of solid materials in a sense. But so you've got soft matter physics, which is like polymers, things like, I think DNA is an example of soft matter physics. And then you've got condensed matter theoretical. Condensed matter is what, so you know what runs your computer, like the chips that run your computer, they fall under condensed matter physics. How a PN junction works, how a diode works, all of these things like diodes, transistors, things like that. That's all condensed matter physics. And the group I was in specialized in magnetism and superconductivity. So I did this summer research placement working on solar cells. I'm making solar cells because they're condensed matter physics. And then I was like, this is my jam. I was like, this is interesting stuff. I want to join these guys. And I got a master's project with them. And then that's one of the penultimate steps. And then I enjoyed my master's. So my master's thesis was about superconductors and ferromagnets. So magnetism combined with superconductors, but in these little layers that are a millionth the thickness of a human hair. Like when you do things like that, when you take it to that quantum level, you start getting weird behaviors. And so I enjoyed my master's so much, and then I found this PhD with a very new young academic in Liverpool. And so it is quantum, but it's not. Everyone envisages quantum now as, say, quantum computers. As, say, quantum computers is the biggest one, but it's not on that level. It is on the quantum level, agreed, but it's not in the trendy, cool way that people see it now. Like the physics I've done is very much the physics for nerds because they like physics. It's not the physics for nerds because they've found a hot trendy thing as well. So like the stuff I've done is kind of like the dull stuff.
Can you explain it in a couple of words what your PhD was about?
So superconductors, you're familiar with them, but I will go through them again. A superconductor is a material that can carry a current, like the wires in this, like the copper wires in here carry a current that transmits this signal. But they have a resistance. So you put too much current through them, you'll get high voltage, you'll get high resistance. The resistance might be constant, but they'll warm up. Superconductors, a current can run through them, but with zero resistance. So that's super important for this is fundamental for the future of energy saving things, because if you can pass a current through something without it being resistive, like when you put a high current through a wire, it'll get to a threshold where it melts itself because there's so much resistance that it will get too hot and melt. With superconductors, that won't happen because there's no resistance.
So you're looking at efficiencies beyond our comprehension.
Well, it's thing so when your laptop down there, when you watch Netflix in your bed on a Sunday night for a few hours, on a hangover or whatever, your legs get nice and toasty. That's because your computer is running so many calculations. There's so much current flowing through. It's getting warm. Well, that's all that's happened with that heat is it's warmed your legs up. It's such a waste of energy. And there are 2 billion computers in the world. Like, think of all those warm legs and all those warm rooms. Just to do what? Just to perform a calculation. So the point of trying to integrate and assimilate superconductors into like the point of having no resistance into modern technology is that you're going to save energy because you can remove that resistive heating. But the issue is with current technology and current materials, you have to cool them down to like 10 Kelvin to like minus 265 degrees. So you waste so much energy doing that. So my PhD was looking at how to help bring superconductors into the forefront and of modern technology, but we're still in such a fundamental point that we haven't got like really useful devices yet that could go into a computer, because the big single problem with superconductors is they have to be cold. They're not room temperature like the semiconductor chips in your computer. So the original question you asked was quantum physics. Yeah, in a sense it is, but quantum is as deep as it is broad. So, but it is quantum physics. Yeah, it's on a nanoscale level. Agreed. But why did I get into that? I think it was just you could say I fell into it, but then you could also say the steps, my decisions from beginning of university to my summer placement to my masters kind of led me into a place where I enjoyed what I was doing. I think in all honesty, my love has always been for experimenting.
Hmm.
So, like with my masters, it was just so experimental. It was so like my masters was mental. I was in the lab, especially in the crunch hours in the final weeks. Probably I was in the lab 8 a.m. till 9 p.m, like just getting it all done, and I just fell in love with that. I just loved doing that. I was like on the equipment, getting the data, taking and analyzing it. And I was actually, even in my masters, I managed to get involved in making some stuff. So then when I got an opportunity to do a PhD where I had to build the equipment in the lab, I was just like, that's me. I was like, that's for me. I was like, I just want to make something from scratch. In all honesty, my PhD was, in terms of startups, it was a 0 to 1 startup for research. Like I turned up, there was nothing there. I had to build all the equipment. I had to get the data from all the equipment, and then I had to publish the data. So that's how I got into it.
That's pretty cool. So it's in a way also like applied in the way that like you like applying end to end. Kind of you start with nothing, you build the thing, you kind of validate your hypotheses, and then you end up with doing research down the line. So you like the whole.
Oh, that's exactly that's the perfect way of summarizing it. Yeah, I think I just fell in love with solving the problem, because for us it was like when I started my PhD, it was like we need a piece of kit that will take us down to minus 272 degrees, and it has to fit in this space, and you can't have a normal helium liquefier. You need a contained system because we don't have the equipment to liquefy the helium again. All of these problems, it's like it has to fit on a desktop. You have to be able to speak to it through a normal computer. All of these things, and it was just like bam. Like I spent 2 years just doing that, and then now like that piece of equipment I've made will run the group for the next 10 years, 15 years.
Wow.
So that was for me. If anything, I think I'm probably more of a physics engineer.
Mm-hmm.
But I did enjoy getting the data from it, and I did enjoy analyzing the data. But I think in the point that you were saying of the end to end, like yeah, it's like starting with absolutely nothing, and also no money. We had no money. Like I had to genuinely first few months of my PhD, I'd made friends in the building, and I would just go to the academics, and I'd literally just be like, "Oh, how are we doing today, John? Are you having a good day? Yeah, blah blah blah." Just make chat with them. Be like, "Oh, I've noticed you've got a spare computer in one of the other rooms. Like, do you need it?" And they'd be like, "No, it's been there for a few years actually." I'd be like, "Oh, could you do us a massive favor, and could you just lend it us for a few weeks? And if you need anything from us, like vacuum system stuff, if you need some stuff for deposition, whatever, you can always ask us." And they'd always be like, yeah. So literally our lab is made from computers and equipment that I've just scavenged by just charming it out of people. That is literally my entire PhD, was just charming stuff out of people. But obviously, like if they wanted something back, I'd always do my best to give something back to them.
Yeah.
But that's the bit I love the most, was just like chatting to people, getting stuff off them, making good friendships, and then like helping them out with stuff if they needed it as well.
Yeah, I feel like the scarcity at university makes you think extra hard. Like in anything, if you're having a startup and you just have no money, you are thinking extra hard. You're more efficient. You're more not cunning, but like in a way, like genius about it in how you get your stuff. Like you're so precise with exactly what you need, and that's a different set of skills. Like I've definitely had some stories. Like we're in the robot intelligence lab at Imperial. We're going around the engineering department, looking for nuts and bolts,
Yeah.
looking for resistors,
No, exactly. That's the
Like-
same as me.
going to the robot society
Completely.
and being like,
But I think that's part of the fun. So
part of
I managed to make friends with the electronics lab, and then they had the best soldering kit going. So I'd just made friends with the guys who run that, and I was like, and they gave me the code to the room in the end. So there was walls of components that I could just have, whereas we'd have had to buy that.
yeah,
And obviously it's not expensive stuff, but it's like when you're in that 0 to 1 zone, it's like you want to get it done now. That was my issue as well, is impatience. It's like I don't want to wait 4 days for components to arrive. I want to get this shit done now. Like I want to make this cryostat now. I am getting somewhere with this. I don't want to stop the flow. So I made friends with electronics lab. They give me the code to the room, and they're like, you can use it whenever you want. I spent months in there just soldering stuff up, using their components. They had a big budget, to be fair to them, but that's part of it. Is that not the hustle, but it's just like making friendships and then when I was in there, I'd chat with them. We got for pints afterwards. You know what I mean? I wasn't even in their group, but I would just I get involved, went for drinks, went for food with them. And then it got to be like a real friendship, and they give me the code to the room, and they give me access to all of their stuff. Like if I even needed a power supply, yeah, okay, as long as you bring it back. Sometimes I wouldn't bring it back, but it would be like that. I think, but you understand, I think that's part of the fun. Personally, I found that part of the fun was like seeing how far you can get on nothing. Like I genuinely relished that endeavor, like seeing how, because we actually didn't have money in the coffers. Like our academic group had run out of money. We had literally like a few thousand left. But when you're working on like deep tech research, you need tens and tens. So like the kit I built, if we'd have bought it, it would have been like 80 grand. But I managed to make it for like 18. Like
that's really cool.
There's different levels to it. Like, but that was the fun of it. Like I had to design it. There was no outsourcing. Zero. I couldn't outsource anything. I had to design everything myself. The only thing I could outsource was the actual construction of, say, a UHV welded implement. Like, say I needed something made bespoke that needed like special welds and things like that, then we'd buy it. But I would have to make the design for them. And I just found that that's what led me on to Entrepreneur First, where we're both at. That's what led me to this. I was like, I've done in essence a 0 to 1 like startup, but in research. So I was like, maybe I'll find fulfillment in do my own startup.
That makes a lot of sense. Is that experience of it's almost like convergence, right? There's nothing, there's vacuum. If you're talking about physics, it's vacuum of space, and suddenly you create this out of nothing, like the whole universe. It's really cool, metaphorically. I think a lot of people spoke about the importance of finding the right team at university. Like, what would you say to, let's say, younger physics guys getting into it, about going into research, trying applied physics? Like, how would you have you got any learnings about how to act or which institution to choose?
I think that's
navigate in that space.
I think that's a genuinely fantastic question, because, and I'll tell you why. Drawing from my own experience, I was offered a PhD at Durham University with a very, very distinguished academic, part of the Royal Society, Del Atkinson, very, very distinguished in my field. He offered me a PhD in Durham, which is a great uni.
Durham is like one of the top institutions in the UK.
I got offered one in Leeds that was joined with Oxford, a joint one between Leeds and Oxford as well. But I chose Liverpool, which is a bit unintuitive. Like, oh, you got Durham, you got Liverpool/Oxford, Leeds/Oxford, and then you've got Leeds. Liverpool. The reason I went with Liverpool and disregarded the other two and said no to the other two, even though I was very honoured to have been offered those, was that the other two groups. So if this is just my experience, and I'm not saying everyone else will believe in this or agree with this, but for me, I wanted to. It depends what skill set you want to develop. So I realized that I wanted to develop a skill set where I could solve any issue I needed to scientifically, but from scratch. In the sense of, had I gone to Durham, all the kit is ready for me to go. Everything's ready to go. I turn up, and there's nothing against people who've gone to Durham. Like you turn up and you can turn the dials and you can get the data out and you can probably get way more papers than I achieved. But you've not had to start from scratch. Same with Leeds. Whereas I went to Liverpool because it was a very young academic, Dr. Liam O'Brien. And I will say today, and I've said it many times, my decision to work with him at Liverpool is arguably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, ever. He was 33 when I joined. I think 33, 32, 34, between those ages. Young academic. Me and Alex Wright, one of my closest ever friends, love that man. If you see this, Alex, I love you always. Me and him were the only two of his students. So two PhD students, me and Alex and Liam, three of us, like an early stage startup. Liam himself, his background is just insane. He was, at the age of 33, he was a lecturer at Cambridge. He'd already done a Marie Curie postdoc. He did his undergrad and his master's at Oxford. He did his PhD at Imperial. Like, this guy's next. He did his first postdoc at Cambridge and then did a Marie Curie. This guy's, he's a prodigy. He's seriously talented physicist. Read his background, went for an interview, and he said straight up, he was like, if you join in here, you're going to have to do everything from scratch. I've got no equipment. You're going to have to make it. And I was just like, bam, let's go. And as well, he was 33. It was just us three, me, Alex, and him. And I was like, this dynamic's going to be so different. Rather than joining a group that was like 20 people already. Do you know what I mean? Like one academic with 15 PhD students, 5 masters, whatever. I was like, no, I want one-on-one time. I want just to be in the mix the whole time. I want it just to be dynamic. I was like, I said to Liam from the beginning, I was like, if I join you, am I going to be able to make decisions where this group goes? Am I going to be able to help decide how we shape this group? He was like, absolutely. And he was true to his word. You know what I mean? Like, it was the three of us. It was the three amigos from the beginning. Like, we shaped how the group is now. He's got like 8 people now.
What is it called? What's the group called?
The Liam O'Brien Group, obviously.
Does it have a special name?
Well, we're the magnetic group, but we're like, there's not like a special name for it to say. Right. It's just, but yeah, it was like, seriously, for me, I just wanted something small, wanted something intimate. I wanted to be like kind of family, like where it was, I could go and see my supervisor if I needed to. In Leeds, I was part of a big academic group where there was like 10 students to the PhD, to the supervisor. And I was like, I don't want that again. And it's hard to get that because every supervisor that's become big, they can't dedicate the time anymore. They're never in the lab anymore. Whereas I knew that if I was the first generation PhD, Liam would be there by our side all the time. And you know what? I was 100% right to make that decision for me. Like, he would take us out for lunch every month. Like, every milestone we achieved, he would take us out for lunch. It was so, because there's only 3 of us. So it's fine. But there are drawbacks, though, I will admit. There are the drawbacks, I think, that I've figured out actually in EF are that being from a very, very young academic group, the networking isn't as big. So, like, people in our cohort, they've come from very well-established academic groups where they can just call on alumni and be like, oh, someone who left 5 years ago. Oh, yeah. How's it going, Jim? I've seen you doing this. Can we have a chat? I don't have any of that because I'm part of a group that has existed. I was one of the first people in it. So there's no like people to fall back on. So that was a downside. But I would say if you have the chance to join a new academic group with a young academic, grab that by the balls, because the level of experience you get is so different. And obviously it depends on the person, because I think I got super lucky as well, because Liam is arguably he's just one of the most personable and just genuine. His people skills are, I think, unparalleled. As in, I've never met anyone in academia like him, ever. As in, like, if I had personal problems, I could talk to him. We could go for a pint. Like, I could chat with him about his family. Like, you don't get that in physics very often. You really don't get that. It's just not. Physicists have a stereotype of being just not personable and being, just awkward and weird. And the stereotype is for a reason.
Like Paul Dirac.
Yeah, because a lot of them are like that. I mean, I've worked with hundreds of physicists. The vast majority are like that. They are. Obviously, there's a lot that aren't, but a lot are. Whereas Liam was just, I owe a lot to him, put it that way. And like, when I write my acknowledgements,
I hope he sees it. I hope
when I write my acknowledgements, he's the first one. He's getting a big fat paragraph. I've actually already what do you call it? Planned it out what I'm going to write to him.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, he's had such an important impact in my life. I moved to Liverpool knowing no one, and then working with him for 4 years, and it's just been such a pleasure, such an honor in a sense.
I'd give you some compliment as well. Like it takes very unorthodox, mature thinking to kind of have that insight that, like, this is what I want. I don't want the prestige. I don't want the wealthy network of individuals. Like, I want to get dirty. I want to grind in the trenches, and that like, no, you're I'd say a minority in that, and like, props to you.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I think you're right in the sense of the trenches. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be like, just, I don't know, just the prestige. You're right. The prestige isn't what's important. I think it's what you learn from it. So maybe I would 100% agree. Like, my physics knowledge probably took a hit for it, because I couldn't focus on pure theory as much, because I couldn't like just sit and read papers all the time, because I was spending half my time with my head in a soldering iron and a cryostat trying to wire it up, things like that. And for some people, they don't want that, and that's fine. That's there's different ways of going around this. They're completely different ways of going around this. It depends what you want. For me, that's what I wanted, and I have nothing against people who want to turn up, smash it, get data, publish some great papers, all that stuff. That's fine. That, for me, that didn't bother me as much.
Well, I guess now you're better off now that you're doing entrepreneurship, right? Like, I feel like that's such an asterisk to your name.
Well, you could completely argue, and I think me taking this course, as in me taking this avenue of my life, doing that PhD, doing that 0 to 1 research startup, got me on EF, no question, because I used a lot of the skills I learned there to persuade them to let me on, and they were like, yeah, this is a type of guy we want. And so I think if I'd have done a different type of PhD, I wouldn't have gotten an EF.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What? Tell me more about what you were doing at Entrepreneur First for the past couple of months. Like, what gaps have you seen in that you could apply your knowledge of quantum physics, condensed matter, compute? So
originally, as you know, Dimitri, great guy. Shout out to Dimitri.
Dimitri Sakharis.
Sakharis is a fantastic man. So driven, pushed me phenomenally well. All praise to him. Genuinely, really, really enjoyed working with him for the 6-7 weeks we were working together. It was a lot of fun. We really wanted to try and use both of our knowledge, because he's done a similar PhD, to try and help alleviate the chip, the integrated circuit chip, like in your phone and your computer. There's electronic vehicles, all these issues now. There are huge lead times on these components. We wanted to see how we could use our knowledge to try and plug those gaps. because we were like, we're both condensed matter physicists, so surely somewhere, like, we've got the knowledge, we've got the get-go to do this. The issue was, so we had a few ideas how to fix this problem. One of them was make the equipment used to develop and produce integrated circuits. So, for example, like the Intel i7, whatever, they need very, very, very expensive equipment made by one company. It was ASML or something.
What? TMSC?
So TSMC, they make the equipment. They make the chips.
Right.
But they don't make the equipment that makes them.
Right. Okay.
They just make them. So they need to get the equipment to make them from someone else, which is a company called ASML.
All right. Where are they based?
They're based, I can't even remember. Are they Taiwanese as well? Either way, ASML, if my memory is correct, produce all the lithography equipment, like to make the miniaturized circuits for like TSMC, for Intel, other companies, right? They're the only people. And they make like 10 of these a year. It's mad. And they're worth like 300 million a pop. Right. So we were like, should we try and undercut them?
It's healthy competition.
We were like, can we try and undercut these people? And it became, we got some really good conversations actually with some big players, some big companies. I got a conversation with, what they called, ARM. We had one with ARM, which is a big company in the UK. It forgets me. I can't remember now, but there's some big companies we spoke with. But it just became very clear that it was too monopolized, and that the capital needed is mental. So like, what in EF we're talking like 80k IC.
Arguably, that money is not to make it's for you to survive until the next venture round, which will get you to like many millions.
True. But we're talking, me and Dimitri would have needed approaching billions.
Right, yeah.
If we were to go down that route. So then we were like, right, let's switch things up. Let's try and go down different, like making memory more sustainable, like computer MRAM, STT RAM, things like that. Let's try and use different materials in MRAM where we can, like carbon-based things. But then I figured out, and being a CTO, I kind of figured out that the physics didn't make as much sense, and that people aren't as bothered about sustainability, or it's about performance. Of course. So we had some big conversations with some big spin outs, and knocked that on the head. So we tried to fix the current issues in computer technology, but I think what I've gleaned from this is that you need to incentivize the big players to do it. It's not for startups to do this. This is such a legacy industry, which you might understand from defense. Like, you've got the big players that own everything.
Yeah.
It's difficult to really be disruptive in this area. It's not a fluid area. It's not an area where, like, because the amount of capital needed to jump in is just ridiculous. So it's like, if you want to be disruptive on that level we want it to be, and then it was like, so then we were like, okay, let's move away from our intersectional skills, like skill sets. Let's move away a little bit from them. But then it fell apart.
That's unfortunate. It's something that was mentioned before in the previous podcast about, like, people underestimate where all electronics in the world come from.
It's crazy.
Like,
it's crazy.
Taiwan.
It is mental.
It's like, look around your room right now. Everything that performs calculations was at one point made in Taiwan.
Literally.
and there is no way around it.
No way
Like,
around it.
No, like, like, let's say there is some sort of political issue in Taiwan that, like, let's say on a statistical anomaly that 100 employees don't make it to the office in Taiwan, the entire world's infrastructure of semiconductors falls apart.
It's madness. And over the 6 weeks, it was just, this was one of the issues we wanted to address, was the fragility of the geopolitical system. And it's like, how do we move away from that? Arguably, one answer is onshoring, bringing production back to the UK. But the levels of Taiwan was so smart. Taiwan, I think it was in the 80s or the 90s, they figured out that semiconductors were going to run everything. And they just invested like motherfuckers. They literally were just like, this is ours. This is ours to keep now. Genuinely, they were like, this is going to blow up. This is going to be the future of the world. And Taiwan was just like, we're going to be the people to do it. And they just invested crazy amounts. And now they own it. They literally, I think it's like 70 or 80% of chips that you see in this room now were produced in Taiwan. Of like the high functioning ones. Not just the standard logic stuff, but like of stuff that does proper, like in your computer right now, in my phone, in your phone. All of those things have come from Taiwan. It's mental. It's absolutely mental. And that is why as well. Do you know the US have an agreement? Well, I don't know if it's a written agreement, but I've said openly, haven't they? If China, the moment China puts boots in Taiwan, they're putting boots in Taiwan. Like they're putting soldiers in Taiwan the moment China does. Why? Because that is an existential threat to the US. The moment China takes over Taiwan, that is an existential threat to the US, as in a serious threat, because the US will stop functioning.
It's so funny how that is made purely from, I mean, obviously the capital, the physical stuff that needs to make it, but silicon is gold, right? Like if you look at the chip itself, costs nothing. It's the most abundant material in the world, but we're fighting it if it was like uranium or something, like the most rare thing in the world. It's so abundant, we don't know how to make it.
Exactly. And that's one thing me and Dimitri realized, was that the UK is fantastic and world leading at designing chips.
Like the ARM, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They don't sell chips; they sell designs and intellectual property.
Design, exactly. IP, exactly. IP, intellectual property. We are world leaders at IP. That's where we are the best. But creating them, we're useless. Like we've got one in Dublin, I think, and we've got some stuff in Swansea as well, but it doesn't fulfill it. Like, I mean, just look at the lead times on electronic vehicles right now. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, so some of the next wars are probably going to be over semiconductor. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Huh?
No, I genuinely think it runs the world. Like the world is only getting more technologically advanced. Everything is data driven. Everything is semiconductor driven. Like, I mean, just think about it now. Like back in the day, look over there. You got an air fryer.
Yeah, it probably runs actually like a very potent like ARM chip, like an ARM.
No, genuinely, it will do. It 100% will, and so will your microwave, and so will your fridge. Like
they run full operating systems on those.
I mean, you can connect these things to to Wi-Fi now.
Yeah.
It's madness. You could probably connect that air fryer to Wi-Fi, I assume.
Yeah,
like, you probably can't. It's madness. Like we're talking that semiconductors have just become so assimilated into everyday life that we're not going to be able to move away from it. We're really not. And so, who holds the cards?
Do you almost see, if we didn't have, let's say, Taiwan, was not a place that would lead to like a collapse of civilization? Because we don't know. Question. Like, let's go there. Like, what would that lead to?
I don't know if I'm qualified enough to give you an insightful answer, but I would say at the moment, with Taiwan owning such a massive amount of the semiconductor market, that there would be serious repercussions to everyday life. Don't get me, like, we're in a world now where innovation is rapid, where people move in quickly. And say China did jump in on Taiwan. I imagine that the Taiwanese companies and government would just offshore very quickly. They would very quickly take all of their IP, they'd take everything they know, and they would be backed by US, they'd be backed by the West. They would be backed very well. They'd be looked after. And those people who run those factories would go, say, somewhere where there's also cheap labor, I don't know, say Pakistan or Middle East or whatever, and they would set up production there. I think would happen, and they'd be backed by the West. They'd have to be. It's in the West. It's an existential threat to the West. Like, you couldn't just let them die, and they would be like the last chopper of Saigon. You know what I mean? The people who run those factories, who have all the IP, who know how those factories work, who know what machines are used, who have all the transcripts, all the blueprints, all of these things, they'd be on the first chopper out of Saigon. They'd be going to where's next. The US would be setting them up, pumping billions into them. I would put money on that happening. The US, the UK, the EU would just be like throwing money at them, make a new foundry. We're fucked without you. But there would be a big issue, no question. But I think the West would back them to the hill. They can't not.
How do you think similar things were said about, for example, we had French people on last time, and they said there is now a dip in, let's say, the French nuclear industry, because the nuclear reactors, the buildings, were built in the previous century, and people who have built them have retired now, and the new generation actually doesn't know how to maintain the equipment. There is a drought. Like, they go into like AI, machine learning, they go into like what's a much hotter industry. So now it's like actually a bit of a drought in physicists who know how to operate these buildings. So it's like actually a countrywide problem. But how do you fix that for semiconductors in the UK? Like, how do you see, if you had, let's say, apart from just having billions invested into it, how do you solve the know-how gap of how to make? Because the silicon, at the end of the day, it's such a commodity. Like, you could buy silicon in tons, but that one chip that weighs like 2 grams runs the world. Like, isn't it so interesting? Like, how would you fix that?
I think you're asking the wrong person. But I think, like I say, in the UK is so strong with IP. Like, that's our strength, is IP. So I imagine, and we do have fabrication people here. I mean, we'd probably have to ship them out from Taiwan. We'd probably have to save them.
Oh yeah,
we'd have to ship them out.
Just talk to the person, right? Like,
to be fair, the thing is, China are producing a lot of chips. They really are. They're like, China are smashing it as well. But the issue is with China, the level of production isn't as high. So you're not getting as high quality because you've not got that legacy. They came to the game later. And so you're actually finding, like, I've got this experience through my granddad. My granddad had an electronics company. He had it recently where he bought like 1,000 of these certain chips in these, I forget what the PICs. They're not very high levels things. They just like run GPS systems and stuff. They're not like the Intel that's in there or whatever. But he was like, they bought like 1,000 or something, and every one of them was duff.
That does work?
Yeah. Like 1,000 of them. And they tested them, sent them to another place, got them tested at a different place, didn't work. Rang up the guy in China, was like, your chips don't work. The guy in China was like, let me get back to you. Tested all of the chips he had in China. They didn't work. So there are different levels to the game. Like, speed can help sometimes, but when it comes to things like this, quality is just so essential. Like, you like, on these things, you've got to be working on, like, if you've got 1 billion transistors, you have to have like less than 1/100th of a percent, 1 millionth of a percent, or something silly, fail rate. Like, they have tests in. They have, like, in that chip that you've got in my phone, your computer, there will be a certain amount of transistors that don't work in that integrated circuit. But the way they've set it up is that it already counts for them. So when you have a certain amount of fail rates of internal transistors, then it stops working properly.
Right, okay.
Because the idea that you're going to have 100% success in everything, physics, is not true. You have to make account for the fact that there's going to be failures. There's always going to be failures.
And we're talking about like nanometer issues, right? Like quantum issues.
7 nanometers, something silly now. We're trying to get down to 4 too.
It was one of the guys that I want to get on in our cohort was working for Apple, and it was just talking about how like
Saffron.
Yeah, a hairline.
He's a really good guy.
I really want to get him on.
He's an awesome guy. I love him.
A hairline scratch on a battery on an Apple phone makes it over time swell like 20 centimeters. It's something crazy. Like the hair over time, that hairline scratch on the surface of the battery will cause it to like swell in time, and that's what happens to like Samsung phones.
Yeah,
that like blow up is because of like tiny imperfections.
Yeah,
and you think, well, a smartphone is a commodity, right? Everyone has a smartphone. Why are these Samsungs blowing up? Like we should be.
Is that what it is?
Well, one of the reasons like that it swells up is because of physical imperfections that companies have a procedure for testing, right? So the level of like you take it for granted it works, right? This complex thing, but in reality,
you buy it, you expect it to work.
Yeah, exactly. But we're talking about such levels of precision that only an island on Earth knows how to do.
Yeah, no, it's madness. It's absolute madness, and so that's what kind of, when you say it like that, that's what kind of led me away from the semiconductor thing, because I was like, if I want to get into this world, I probably need a good 5-10 years in the trenches, working in the foundries, making those links, getting involved, like knowing it back to front to back. You get what I mean? Like really hands-on. So I think that's how you've got to approach that problem. Not all problems, but that problem. It is my belief after working in this space.
You are listening to The XOR.
Human conversations at the frontier of technology.
This is The XOR.
The XOR.
The XOR.
The XOR.
The XOR.
XOR.
So I grew up in a Christian household. My dad is a devout Christian. My grandma is. And I went to church up until the age of 14. I went to church every week. But I had issues with it from the age of 9, 10. Like steep issues with religion.
What type of Christianity was it in the UK?
So my dad and my grandma, they go to, and my mum as well, but not as much. They are like the way you describe it, it's not Catholic or Protestant. It's like evangelical, which is more like there's not as much dogma. Like they just read the normal Bible and they just have a relationship with God, whatever. There's not like ceremony and pomp, and like they do tithe, and they do every month they do what's it called, where you eat the bread and all that, communion and all that stuff. But that's it. It's like it's more communion, if anything. Like the amount of time my grandma gives to the community is mental. Like she feeds the homeless 3 times a week. Like the church have just installed showers for the homeless people, And that's what, like, they're very interfaith based as well. Like they do lots of stuff with local mosques, local synagogues. It's very just, it's more, to me it seems more like the community than anything. But they're Christian and they believe in Jesus and the Bible and stuff. But yeah, when I was, for me, so I went to church from being born, and I went every single week till I was 14. And I remember there's a few like big events that happened, and one of the biggest ones was I was like 9 or 10 years old, right? And I used to, sometimes if my dad was up, because my dad used to work in A&E, in that accident emergency in our local hospital. So some Sundays he couldn't take me to church, but my mum would be working as well. So I'd stay at my grandma's and she'd drop me off at church. Well, she'd take me to church. And I remember whenever I stayed at my grandma's as a kid, she would always have books for us to read at night. And so usually there'd be like the Dandy or the Beano, you know, like comics. But sometimes there'd be like a few science books there that she'd just get from the charity shop, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I read this one about the solar system, right? I remember reading this book at night in bed before church. And I was like, and it was like on about our sun, the star, that's our sun. The sun that is our star. And it was talking about it, it was like, oh, this is a main sequence star. So because of its size and its brightness, we know its life cycle. So in 5 billion years, or whatever it is, our sun will become a red giant. It will blow up. It'll start doing this oscillation thing where it gets large, small, large, small, large, small, which is due to the mass inside it and the forces of fusion, etc. And basically, we within 5 billion years or whatever, our whole solar system will be eaten by the sun because it will expand so large. So I read this book and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. As a kid, I was like 10 years old, whatever. I remember going to church the next day, and our Sunday school teacher, what's it called? Mr. Smith. He actually called Mr. Smith as well. He was like talking about the end of the earth for some reason to 10-year-old kids. And he was like, it's going to end because of whatever it is, the apocalypse, whatever. And I was like, Kev, isn't it going to end because the sun's going to swell so large that it eats the earth? And he just turned around and went, that's wrong. I was like, but I read it in a science book last night. And he was like, that's wrong. And I was like, how can he say that? In my head, I was like 10 or whatever. I was so perplexed. I was like, how can this religious teacher just turn around and dismiss the science that I've read? I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And it just started to crumble after that. And I was like, it didn't make sense. So then when I got to be like 14, I'd already figured out I really didn't believe in any of it. And I was like, it just doesn't make sense. I was like, none of this makes sense. It just makes, I was like, how can you talk to God? As a kid, right, here we go. As a kid, I remember I used to pray every night that I wouldn't have nightmares. Right? I used to pray, I'd be like, oh, thank you, Lord Jesus, blah, 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 blah. Please don't let me have nightmares tonight.
Don't have a nightmare.
Yeah, don't have a nightmare. I pray to not have nightmares. Right. Every night I'd pray as a kid. I'd be like, I'll pray not to have nightmares. And I would be really worried that if I didn't pray, I would have a nightmare. Because I used to have nightmares loads as a kid. Then one night I forgot to pray. I didn't have a nightmare. So all of these things added up.
So wait a minute.
I was like, wait a minute. So anyway, so I left church when I was 14 because I was just like, with my dad, I was like, I don't believe any of this. I don't. And he's like, you've got to go to church. I was like, I'm not going to church anymore. I don't want to go to church. And he's like, made me go till I was 14, 15, whatever. I was like, no. Anyway, then when I got to like 17, 18, I really, really started researching atheism. Like, have you heard of Christopher Hitchens?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to be like a Hitchens fanboy. It was embarrassing. I used to like any Hitchens video on YouTube. I've watched it.
All right.
I'm not even lying. I've probably watched 200-300 hours worth of Hitchens stuff.
He's passed away now, right?
Yeah. That was one of my. I used to be like gutted that he was dead. I used to be like, I can't believe you're dead. Why are you dead? I was obsessed. Like him, Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, all of these people, like big atheists. I used to be like humanists, whatever you're gonna call them.
Do you watch a lot of the debates that they have?
I love the debates. That was the thing, though. I loved the religion versus atheism debates. That was the main things that I would watch. I wouldn't just watch monologues. I didn't want to listen to the monologues as much because with the monologues you don't learn as much because you don't learn how to counteract an argument. With a monologue, you learn what you want to hear.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's fine for someone to speak at a camera for an hour without pushback. Whereas when you have a fierce debate where it means a lot to people, especially like, have you ever watched the IQ squared, the intelligence squared one where it's like Christopher Hitchens, Stephen Fry, and then it's they're debating and someone else debating like an archbishop and
I must have seen it. Yeah, it's quite popular videos on YouTube.
yeah, what's she called? The MP, the old MP, what's she called? For the Tories, and then she became like a anti-Brexit MEP. I forgot what she called. Her name will come back to me. Old woman. Anyway, I used to love those debates because it's just like you get it makes you bolster your own argument. So, and as well, luckily, my dad being a strong Christian, but being a very, very open and honest man, like I really explored this with him. And so at the beginning, I'd watch all these debates, and I would debate him, and I'd thrash him, and it'd be like he'd literally be on the back foot the whole time. I'd just be slaying into Christianity, all of these things. I used to be almost like militant atheist. I used to be like anti-religion almost. I used to be like, it's the root of all evil, all this, you know what I mean? I was like, religion ruins everything, X, Y, Z. And then the more I got talking with my dad, and he was just so open to admitting when he didn't know. Like, I'd grill him about something wrong with Christianity. I'd be like, how can you stand, like, having gay friends yourself? Like, my dad was one of the first people that was, like, ever showed me, like, being gay wasn't wrong. Like, when I was a kid, I remember he worked with someone who was gay, and he was like, he worked with someone in A&E who was gay or something. And I was like, oh, but your colleague is gay. I must have been like 8 or something. And my dad just turned around and went, and? So what? But that was back in the day, in the early millennium, when being gay was like not okay. 20 years ago. You know, like 20 years ago in the UK, it wasn't like it is now. Being gay was still like a thing you could, like, was acceptable to discriminate. I remember saying to him, like, oh, but your mate's gay or whatever. He was like, and? So what? So anyway, so I would grill him about all these issues with homosexuality in the church and how repressive it was and all these things. And he was like, originally he was always on the back foot, and then he like took some time to research and really dig into the meta of religion. You know, really like, because I was like, you can't rely on the Bible anymore, Dad, because the Bible's fucked. I was like, read the Bible, it's fucked. I was like, it's just so bad. I was like, there's so many awful things in the Bible, it's just not defensible. And then he kind of like took it more to the theological argument. He took it more to the, you know, the theological, philosophical argument of God and stuff. And he taught me like how to just, in a sense, without doing it on purpose, he taught me how to not be anti-religious. How to like realize that if everyone thought the same, it'd be fucking boring. Like, and that's why now I'm not anti-religion at all. I wouldn't say I'm pro-religion, but I'm not. I would hate for there to be no religion, because I think the world would. I think humans will find something different. We'll always find something to align to. It's just human nature to want to believe in something.
So have you, in your journey researching these things, have you ever considered other religions, let's say Buddhism or Taoism, that was more to do with, you know, I would say it's more spiritual than religious? Have you ever had inclinations to like that sort of? A lot of people who are atheists kind of find maybe they don't, the Christianity is not for them, but other religions, you know, are more acceptable to them.
I think that's a good question, and I'll be honest, no, and there's a reason why. So, in my journey into like figuring out, because in figuring out like religion, what to mean, what is it, does it make sense just truth wise and science wise? Because being scientists, we know everything is run by science. Every single thing is run by science. That's everything. Like, nothing exists without science. That's just the way it is. Like, you can't get around that. It runs the entire universe, especially physics. And so spirituality also does tie into Christianity in some ways, because in Christianity, like, you believe you can connect with a higher being. In this sense, it's more visceral. It's more like you can talk to this higher being. You have a relationship with this higher being. But even with spirituality, you are connected to something that's bigger than yourself. And so this might sound a bit wishy-washy, but the way for me, one of the big realizations, and it might sound trivial to some people, but when people say they can talk to God, which is a spiritual endeavor, we know. I did a module called quantum information, and information, any type, is physical. So I'm sending you information right this second with my voice. My vocal cords are vibrating air, which is sending a wave to you, which your ears pick up. That is a piece of information. When I text you, my phone sends photons, which are light, but a different type of light, to a satellite, which beams it back down to your phone. They're photons. They are measurable things. You get the text, that's information. Yeah. Information is in different ways, many different ways, but it's always physical. Always, always physical. So, why am I saying this? Because if you're trying to connect to a higher being, if you're trying to speak to a higher being, that means you're sending information. There's no way you can talk without sending information. So, when people say they spoke to God, that means they're hearing God in their head. That means they're connecting with God on some level, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that without a particle. There's no way, because no information can be sent otherwise. Feelings aren't feelings. Feelings are actual atoms in your brain. When you have a thought in your head, it's not nothing. It's electrons. It's chemicals firing in your synapses. It's electrons moving around the nerves. It is a physical, tangible thing that if you wanted to, you could weigh. It would have a mass. It'd be very small. But it's a real particle. It's a thing, an actual measurable thing. So this idea, for me, I can't get my head around, is that, so people are, I spoke to God last night. Well, how did they send you information? Did they speak and vibrate air? Because then they would have to be near you and you'd know. Or did they send photons to you via text, but your brain accepted them and then turned that into a message?
So you're saying, if you did communicate, there would be information passed, and if there was, we'd be able to measure it.
That's the only way.
And then basically you're saying because we can't measure it, it didn't happen. Is that what
That's
you're
exactly what I'm saying.
All right.
Because where in your brain is there a receiver for this information? Where's the hardware that accepts it? It's like the idea of people saying, like, this is why I don't believe in souls either. Because if we had a soul, the anatomy of the human body is very well known. A soul has to be a real thing. It has to be a real entity. It has to be particles to exist. It has to be matter to exist. Else it doesn't exist. Else it's a vacuum. So, if we had a soul, we'd know where it come from. Is it excreted by your thyroid gland? Is it from your armpit? Where does it reside? Is it in your brain? The brain's pretty well researched now. We've got MRIs. We should know if we'd know where it sits in the brain. So for me, this is what made me realize that I don't believe in any religion. There isn't a spirituality. There isn't a soul. But I realize that there's a beauty to that. Because do we think our cats have souls? Do we think that the beetles, the 1 million species of beetles have souls? Do we think that zebras or hippopotami, whatever, have souls? No, we don't. We just think because we're sentient and conscious beings, we've got them. But no, we're just part of the natural order.
Some religions would probably disagree that animals have souls as well. But okay, I see where you're going with this. Do you think there could be something that's immeasurable, or space for faith of that, something that we haven't discovered yet?
So I think that people can make an argument that there's a particle we haven't discovered yet, but the fact still stands. Information is measurable. Information is a particle, always. Because if you don't have a particle, you have a vacuum. If you have a vacuum, you have nothing. You can't have something without. You can't have something without nothing without. Like you just.
Okay.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. Let's say the communication was with photons, and there did exist a being that was communicating. It's just that it's so infinitesimal. It's just not measurable with current equipment. Would you kind of accept that thought? It's like the communication does happen, you could measure it, but like you just can't at the stage of your like scientific breakthrough.
To be fair, some people, from what the spiel I've just given, some people are very arrogant, very narrow-minded, and I understand like some people have theories about twin telepathy and all these things, and I still I speak to myself in my own head. That's my conscience. That's what it is.
All right. Okay.
And I have nothing against it. If people want to say that they spoke to God, that's fine. I have nothing against that. I don't think they have. I really don't think they have. But if they want, but I won't argue with them, because who am I to deny that? I have nothing against it. I just don't think they are.
Do you believe in anything that's like? Is there any space for mysticism or some sort of phenomena that are unexplainable that happen?
For me, no. No, because again, like the ghost thing, ghosts have to be particles again. They have to be made of something. They aren't, everything has to be made of something. It has to be. There's no way around it.
Okay,
it just has to be. There's no other way of looking at it. Like, if something happens, it can't be nothing. It has to be a physical, whether it be a few atoms in a weird arrangement, yeah, but it has to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand the line of thought for sure.
And I've spent a lot of time thinking about this.
Yeah.
But these realizations occur
You
during
came
during my masters and stuff, during my physics undergraduate. And I actually had a very good conversation with a Sikh who was in my cohort at Leeds. I had a very good conversation with him actually, because I asked him this question. I said to him, me and you are in the same classes. We've both done particle physics together. We know that everything is made from particles, everything. If it's not made from a particle, it doesn't exist. It's just a vacuum. So there's nothing there. If there isn't a particle there, there's nothing there. So I said to him, where's God then in Sikhism? Where is, and I wasn't like trying to take the piss or anything. I was like really interested. I was like, where do you see God? And he was like, you remember saying, he was like, God is the water, God is the cup, God is this. And I was like, the atoms of the cup.
The what?
It's like the atoms of the cup. He was like, God is the water in this cup. God is the cup. God is, God is this. God is everything.
Right, okay.
So I was like,
unscientific.
I was like, everything has to be rooted in science. Everything. It has to be, because that is the order of the world. That is the order of the universe. If it's not rooted in science, it's not. It's nothing.
Are there some sort of neo-religions that are like transhuman and just sort of, they're like based on quantum physics, but then accept the universe as being like a higher organism? Therefore, is there anything like that?
So the only argument I think you can make is not. So I'm arguing against a theist position. A theist is someone who believes that you can interact with God. God orders the world, the universe. God. So when things happen, that's part of their plan. The deist position is that God set the universe in motion and let it run. God made the laws of physics and let them run and doesn't intervene. I think you can there is an argument for that.
Okay.
But that would agree with my argument in that God doesn't speak to you. because God has set the universe in motion, has set the laws of physics in motion, and has left it as it is. They've done it from the beginning, but they don't touch it after. You can make that argument. You cannot make a theist argument, I don't think.
All right, so let's go into the deist then. Okay, so you could accept a position where there were like God or multiple gods that kind of set the wheel in motion, and you can't communicate with them.
Yeah,
Is that fine?
How would you prove against that though? The only reason I think that you can make that argument is because you can't prove against it.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I would. I think you can argue for the deist position, but not the theist position. But again, like, I'm not trying to slate religion. This has just come from my physics masters and my PhD, and just living and breathing the fabric of, like, learning what the fabric of the universe is and what makes, no question, there's still discoveries to be made, like antimatter, things like negative energy, etc. No question. Like, we've still got hurdles to jump. But I think with the amount of scientific evidence we already have, I think it's quite concrete that there isn't a God, that there isn't a God that is involved in our lives, that makes choices, that has a plan for us, that puts their hand in to stop events or make events happen. Like, I remember when I got hit by a car when I was like 13 or whatever. I got absolutely twatted by this car. Didn't break a bone, luckily, somehow. It's on my mate's dad's bicycle as well, so I fucked his bike up. And I got absolutely twatted by this car at like 30 miles an hour, went fucking flying. Didn't break a bone. I remember my grandma saying to me, someone was looking out for you tonight. God was looking out for you. And I remember, like, later on being like, he was fucking looking after me. He wouldn't let me, he wouldn't have let it happen. You know what I mean? I was like, he was looking after me. I wouldn't get fucking hit by the car, would I? That was her way of being lovely, and I love my grandma to bits. I'm very close with my grandma. But yeah, I completely remember thinking, yeah.
But to this day, let's say your family kind of sticks to faith and kind of, you do your thing. Like, that's you. There is maybe a bit of, what's that word? Where even though people know that their arguments are not strong, they are using it, like, they see the benefits of faith, and it's like, yeah, it helps me.
No question.
There's a word for that. So they're like accepting of maybe the illogical aspect of what they're doing, but they're like, you know what, prayer helps me, like, run the course of my day. I feel much better when I do.
No question. I have no issue with that, because you can say the same about me when I meditate on a daily basis. It's just a different form of meditation, surely. It's just,
so when you meditate, you don't see it as spiritual. You just see it as...
I do it for mental health, and I do it just for peace of mind and to be comfortable in my own brain. You can argue that when people pray daily, they're doing the same thing. How is that different to me meditating? I don't think it is different. I think it's just another form. Their form of meditation is speaking to a God that calms them. My meditation is sitting down for 5 minutes in the morning and breathing exercises. It's the same thing, but they have a religious spin on it, which is fine. I have nothing against it. Genuinely, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, it's fine. I think that's what people could argue against me. Is you meditate. This is my meditation, and I should say, absolutely, and you're welcome to it. And I wouldn't want you to stop on my God ever.
So it's interesting that your dad kind of keeps his view. Also, like, he's a medical doctor, right? So
We've
like
had some good conversations about this.
So like, your quantum physics PhD. Your dad has to learn the anatomy, right? Like, he's a doctor.
He saves lives every day.
So
every single day.
Yeah, like he's a scientist.
Literally,
right?
I've asked him this question. The question you're going to ask. How does he square it?
Yeah.
No, I've said this to him. I was like, Dad, how do you square the fact that you save lives every day? Like, who's saving lives? As in, I said to him a few years ago back now, I was like, is it God that's given you this information, not science? This was when I was in my, like, not aggressive, but my heavy atheist days, when I was like, screw religion, atheism's the only way. You know what I mean? And I was like, Dad, you've dedicated your life to medicine. You've dedicated your life to saving lives through your own knowledge. Like, you're the reason people are alive, not God. I was like, you were the one saving lives, not God. Because that's what sometimes used to piss me off when I was like really heavy atheist. I used to be like, how can people thank God before they thank the surgeons? How can, you know what I mean? Like, someone's had a big surgery and they'll go, oh, praise to God. You know what I mean? All this stuff. They're like, oh, first I've got to thank God for keeping me alive. It's like, no. I used to be like, no, fucking thank the surgeons and the nurses and the anaesthetists, you know, and you know what I mean? And the people who have fucking put the balls on the line to save you. I used to get really angry about it. I don't know why, because it didn't affect me.
Angsty at
Yeah,
atheist stage.
Yeah, I was angsty in my beliefs. And I remember saying to him, I was like, Dad, you're the one saving lives. How do you square this? You're the one saving lives. And I think the way if I remember correctly, the way he saw it is like, his religion is like, his religion is him. He is his religion. So whatever he does is like, his religion is part of that, in a sense. So
you rationalize it that, you know, God put me here and God.
Exactly, yeah. Like, he is who he is. He has gone down the path he has. He saves lives every day, and part of the reason of that is because of his religion.
Yeah.
So
there's no separation.
for me, I could say, yeah, you could have done. Look at all your atheist friends you work with, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point, is it? The point is that for him, he is religious, and for him, arguably, that's why he is where he is. So, for me, he's the least, and he'll kill me if he sees this, but he is the least Christian you've ever met, just because of how forward thinking he is, how just human, and how thoughtful. And I'm not saying religious people aren't like this, but he's the least dogmatic person you've ever met in your life. So forward thinking, he's so accepting of other people, which I would argue religion often isn't. I would really argue all religions really aren't accepting of other people on the whole. Like, especially the Abrahamic religions, especially Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they're not very accepting of each other or other people. Like, it's their way or the highway. People argue different with me, and if they do, let's have another podcast and talk about that on its own, because
Sounds great.
I love chatting with this. Like, I would love to like chat with some heavy faith-based people and just shoot the shit and just chat with them and explore things. And like, because I mean, just before when we were talking about the communism stuff, that gave me some perspective that I'd never seen before. And like, I love hearing opposing opinions.
Let's do it. I'll be the moderator.
Yeah, let's do it. If you can get some faith-based people in, I would love to just shoot the shit with them and just chat and just be honest and open and no holds barred, and we just
we'll do preparation. But you definitely are a black belt. You come prepared. I'm like just nodding and be like, oh yeah, fair enough. Tell me more about like your dad's career, because that was really interesting when you told me before about like what it takes to be someone who is at the forefront of like horrible situations during accidents.
Oh my god, my dad's my hero. I used to cringe at my dad has always called his dad his hero, and I used to cringe about, oh, your dad's your hero, that's not cool. And then, do you know what it was? Just to go off on a tangent, have you ever watched Fred Gino and Ramsey Go Abroad?
No, I didn't watch that.
But anyway, Fred, from First Days.
They're both cooks, right? And
He's
Fred
a maitre d'. Fred's the maitre d', French.
Right.
And anyway, he said it on TV. He was like, "My dad's my hero," and I was like, "My dad's my hero." I was like, "Fuck." Anyway, so yeah, my dad. When I was born, when I was a kid, my dad worked as a just as a clerk in the courts, very low paid job. It was me, my mum, and dad, and my little brother at the before he became a nurse, and lived in a 2 up, 2 down in Manchester, in one of the roughest areas of Manchester. We had nothing, poor, so poor. Went to one of the worst schools in the area. It was it didn't bother me though, because there was love in the house, so it didn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't feel poor. We didn't have anything, but we didn't feel poor because we were such a strong family. And anyway, my dad figured out like being a clerk in a court wasn't going to do anything for him. He literally used to like hand papers from the prosecutors or the defense to the judge. That was his job. He was that person in court who would literally just pass papers, and it wasn't a glorified job, and it wasn't very well paid. So he was like, and then his grandma, my great grandma, died, and he was like, he saw how the hospice treated her, and he was so impressed with the care they gave her, and he's like, I need to be a nurse. And this was back in the day when men weren't nurses as well. Because when I was a kid, people would be like, what did your dad work as? I'd be like, oh, he's a nurse. They'd be like, your dad's a nurse. a male nurse.
It's the worst thing for your dad to be as a kid.
Literally, like, aren't nurses girls?
My dad's in the army. He'll kick your dad's ass. What
Exactly,
do you
yeah.
do? Oh, he's a nurse.
Like, my dad will save your dad. Anyway, so he worked his way up. So he started off pretty, remember correctly, he started off working in the ear, nose and throat ward as like a ward nurse, and then he managed to get into A&E, accident emergency, and he worked his way up to being charge nurse of A&E. So he ran A&E. He was the boss when he was on his shift. He ran A&E, and that's got to be a high. I get a lot of inspiration from the stories that he told me, like some phenomenal stories. The amount of lives he saved. I don't know how he's not got PTSD. Like some of the shit he's seen. Like I remember telling a story of a guy who came in who'd been stabbed in the abdominal with a bread knife. This guy comes in with like white as a sheet, and he's like holding his abdomen, and like has a blanket over him or something covering his abdomen, and he like pulls it back, and all his insides are just his missus had stabbed him with a bread knife, things like that. He couldn't save that guy. But then there's another one where like this guy with a convertible car had took the top of his head off, like under a lorry or something, like crashed it, and he had his brains in his hands, was talking to this guy whilst he had his brain in his hands, and like he's seen like little children die, and he's seen just the worst things ever, and it's the fact he like how human he is in all of it. Like there's a story that I always tell people, and forgive me, Dad, if you didn't want me to tell this story, but this is one of the proudest stories I ever tell people about you, and I never stop telling it because it makes me so proud. The story of a little girl who a mother had done a paddling pool for her in the summer, and the mum just went out for 60 seconds to get some drinks, come back, and the daughter's dead in the pool, drowned. And they get her to the hospital. My dad performs resuscitation. This girl's dead though. Keeps her alive long enough to die in her mum's arms, so that she didn't die on the table, and so that she could die with her mum holding her. And in that time, my dad had the forethought and the humanity to go and get an ink pad and press her hands and feet onto the ink pad, and then write like "Mummy, I love you," so that her mum would have, in that moment, her hands and feet pressed onto paper for the rest of the mother's life. She died after that. Obviously, she died not very long after that, hours, I think. But just like the ability to think like that, I just can't get any more inspiration from it. Like, if I end up half the man I am that my dad is, then I'll be successful in life. And that's the way I see it. But you could argue that, back onto the faith thing, that part of it's that. But I just think he's such a good man that he doesn't need faith.
Inspiring.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes I'm trying to not emulate that, but I'm trying to the amount of good my dad does in the community still. Like, I've been walking with my dad in our local town, and his patients have stopped us, his local patients, and been like, "Oh, Daniel, you don't know what your dad's done for me." You know what I mean? Like, can't even go through the local town without people stopping us because he's that well regarded. Like, he just changes lives every day, and it's like, I can't do that with physics.
Oof.
I can't.
That's interesting.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like the skills I've got from a PhD, I need to use the transferable skills in like medtech or something, because I think that's where I want to be in life. Is like, I feel like I want to. I'm not saying I have to be my dad, because I'll never be my dad, and I don't want to be my dad because I'm myself. But I feel like that's what my dad, like, I would get fulfillment out of. Like, I see the good he does. And to be fair, if my dad sees this, he'll be cringing. He'll be like, "You're giving me too much credit. I don't do this, I don't do that." But he just can't admit it. But that's the mark of a good man, isn't it? Someone who can't even admit when they are a force for good. Someone who can't even be like, "Yeah, I do good things every day." Like, he won't accept that. You try and tell him that he changes lives every day. He's like, "I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing my job." He don't do it for the accolade. He don't do it. Like, he's the best man I've ever met in my life. Ever. He's my best mate. Like, he's my hero.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
Like,
I feel so lucky.
it's always inspiring, like, to see, fathers be great figures for their children and look up. It is definitely like, I don't know if it's rare, but it's definitely amazing when it happens. I love to see it.
I feel lucky every day, because I know that there are lots and lots of men out there who have bad fathers or absent fathers, and I just wish that they had. I genuinely just sometimes wish like every dad was like mine. The world would be different. It would be totally different. And I do like, I've got friends who've got awful fathers and awful mothers, and I've not got the same relationship with my mum, but I love mum to bits, and we get on very well now. But like, I do wish that there was more. There's more of abundance of good parents. Like, I didn't have anything as a kid, but it didn't matter because I had good parents, so that made up for it. Whereas I know people who grew up with nothing but had awful parents, and it affects them for the rest of their life. Like, your upbringing is the first 5 years at least of your life are just so fundamental. They're just so fundamental, and I just was beyond lucky to have the parents that I grew up with.
Do you see the argument of nature and nurture?
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that? Because I definitely do agree that most of the grief in this world actually comes from the bad passage of parenthood, right? Like,
100%.
You dig not even much deeper into any situation.
Yeah.
Like an awful situation, you kind of end up at like bad parenthood.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Like, nature versus nurture. You look at where I grew up. It was, people are gonna see this and be like, "Oh my god, he grew up in the slums." I grew up in a poor area, and to be fair, in the first primary school I was at, a good number of them are now in prison.
Oh yeah,
genuinely, a good number of them are either now in prison or have been in prison, and that's not a lie. Like, so it wasn't a good like place. But my parents, the nurture was what it was about. I never doubted that my parents loved me, ever. My dad would tell me he loved me every day. Every single day he told me he loved me. Even now. My phone's just gone off. It's probably a text from my dad saying I love you.
Oh.
Well, that's the level of relationship we have. And that's why I feel so lucky, because I've never, ever thought I wasn't loved. You know, like, as a kid, it used to be too much. You'd be like, oh, Dad, come on. And that's why I cringed when he was like, oh, my dad's my hero. And then when I was like, finally, when I watched that TV show and that famous person was like, my dad's my hero. And I was just like, my dad's my hero.
That's okay to say that now.
Yeah, no, genuinely, give me the... It shouldn't have took that, but it did. You know what I mean? Like, a famous person on TV said that, and I was like, that barrier just was knocked down. But nurture is so important. Like, I've got very, very good friends who have just not had the right nurturing, and I wish they did, because they would be so much happier in themselves, I think. Like, I think a lot of it stems from where you grew up, how you grew up. Sorry, like what your nurturing was. And like I keep saying, like, we didn't have anything, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter, because we were just loved as kids. There was never that doubt. It was like, as a kid, like, I think in the primary school I went to, I am one of 2 people who went to university in the primary school. In my year, out of 30 kids, I think 2 went to university. Why? Why is that? Because from the age of 4 or whatever, my dad was like, I didn't go to university and I made a mistake. I didn't have the right guidance. Like, my grandparents obviously love my dad. I'm very close to my grandparents. They did an amazing job. Look at my dad. He's the best person alive. But he didn't have that nurturing, like, pushed. He wasn't pushed. Whereas my dad was like, I'm not letting that happen to you. I'm going to push you. You're being pushed. You're going to university. But it wasn't a forceful thing, though. It was like, you should go to university. I want you to go to university. But at the same time, he was like, I don't care as long as you're happy as well. So to word it better, like, he was like, the best thing for you is university if you want to get out of this life. If you want to get away from Manchester, you know what I mean? If you want to broaden your horizons. He was like, university is a great way to do that. And he was like, and I didn't have that push. And I wish I had had that push. But he was also like, as long as you're happy, I don't care. He used to say, you could do bins for all I care. You could be a bin man. Nothing against bin men. But you know what I mean? It was like, you could work in a butcher's or a fishmonger or be a bin man. Just, you know what I mean? Something nondescript. Some people, there's nothing against butchers, bin men, and fishmongers. But you know what I mean? He was like, you could do something like that, and as long as you're happy, it doesn't matter. But he was like, university is probably the best place for you. So from being a kid, I knew I was going to university. There was never a doubt in my mind. Never a doubt in my mind I was going to university. But nurture, 100%. 100%. I think it's literally almost all about the nurture. I really think it is. Like, it has to be. It has to be. It just has to be. You see people who come from awful upbringings, as in, like, areas in Africa that have got no money, but they've been nurtured properly. And they become so successful, so not just successful, but happy, wealthy. They go on to change lives because they've had the right upbringing. They've had the right infrastructure around them, support system around them. I think the answer is nurture.
You are listening to The XOR.
Human conversations at the frontier of technology.
This is The XOR.
The XOR.
The XOR.
The XOR.
The XOR.
XOR.
I'm trying to think now, because this is the issue I think I have, is that it's the medical shit that really interests me. It's the shit where I'm like, how can you make doctors' lives easier? How can you... So, like, finger pulse detectors. Like, they're mad. They're like infrared. Oh, do you know what they are?
Yeah, PPGs.
Yeah, but do you know what they are?
Yeah, I did biomedical engineering.
Yeah,
So like
exactly. So it's literally what? Two
two
infrared lights.
two LEDs, one green, one red.
Yeah, and then an infrared receiver, and that's it. That's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
And you can get, but the thing is, you don't just get heart rate. What else do you get? You get O2 levels.
Yeah.
You get oxygen sats. How? And that's old technology, but that's mad. That's just nuts. That's absolutely nuts. Like, the idea of that innovation, I think, is just phenomenal. That's what like gives me a hard on, to put it lightly.
I resonate strongly with that because I did medical engineering, and even when I did robotics, it was in the bioengineering department. So it was always technology applied to the body, and that's kind of what I went with through life, and also like at EF, it's a weird concept to try to describe to people, but I was saying that I love when technology eventually combines with the human.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough that I found a degree in the UK. Like, not many countries offer that. So there are degrees in the UK that study technologies applied to the body, prosthetics. They teach you how medical devices work, how the physics of heart rate and the way electricity passes through your nerves and all of that shit. So that's why I know how PPGs work, how like you get brain signals, how you get heart signals, how you get many different types of let's say, how do you get a brain signal to control like an artificial limb? That is insane. So I feel like I've always loved that. At the end of the day, for me, kind of technology has to end up with the human.
Yeah.
In one way or another. And
You need a human in the loop always.
Huh?
You need a human in the loop, don't you?
yeah. Technologies with a human in the loop. So like robotics on its own, you've kind of, let's say you create a robot platform. It's not enough. Like, the platform has to be like either integrated into the body or somehow help the body. So I was like, for example, even surgical robots. Have you seen the surgical robots? They're like these.
Oh yeah, they're insane. Like the video of the guy performing surgery on a grape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a meme, wasn't it? Yeah. So that for me is like, I don't know, a personality trait that I think we kind of share. And that, like, how do we, like, yeah, we know this tech. We know how it works, but it's not enough. Like, it has to be somehow applied to healthcare.
This is so true. And I got a really funny example of like why like you've got the tech, but you need the human there always, pretty much at the moment. And just an example, my dad was telling me a story. He was working in resuscitation once. So a guy just had a heart attack on him. He brought him back to life, was talking to him. This guy died. He was chatting with him after it because he brought him back. Having a good conversation, and this guy was ECG'd up. You know, I had fucking all the sensors on him. And my dad was talking to the guy, but watching his heart on the monitor. And he was talking to this guy, and he noticed he'd got. So you go into a heart attack, and you can keep talking. So he was having a heart attack, but talking to my dad without knowing.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad just punched him in the chest, which is called a precordial thump. So he's like, you get punched right in the middle. You punch them to jolt the heart. So he punched them hard. So my dad punched this guy in the chest when he was talking to him. Because the ECG had shown. Went into cardiac arrest, but obviously it wasn't as bad because my dad had given him that precordial thump. But he saves him again. When this guy comes out, it's like, why the fuck did you punch me in the chest? But that is the point of the fact that you always need the human there, don't you? Because if my dad hadn't been there to twig that he was going into another cardiac arrest, he wouldn't have been able to punch him. And then that's one of my favourite stories actually as well. I punch him in the chest, he saves his life again. And then he goes, why the fuck did you punch me in the chest? But yeah, do you think we can get to a point where we have like fully autonomous robotic
Integration?
where you don't even need humans anymore? You just have you have a robot, like you come in with the problem, robot scans you, like you talk to the robot, it scans you, checks your vitals, like fucking probes you, whatever, and then it's like, right, this person's got this, and this, and then it's just like, right, let's fucking go. Just does what it needs doing.
Science fiction, obviously, but
Is it?
well,
Is it?
yeah. It's always
At the moment.
at one point in time for everything. Someone said this is science fiction, that we take it's reality now, and we don't even think twice about it. But I think fully end-to-end autonomous systems have never worked. They're always technologies made for humans are on a different level of success than like fully autonomous systems, always. Like the best systems are the ones that improve the human, not replace the human, or like they kind of allow you to do more. That's why
That's a very good way of thinking of it.
yeah, like even
That help the human, not replace the human.
every time you can think of anything, like let's say we think of like data science and traders, right? No autonomous trading system has made like any strides, right? It's always give me enough data so that I can make the decision.
Yeah.
Those systems are the ones that win all the time. It's the ones that in any endeavor, if it's Formula One, a good example, let's say I worked at a company that was, I didn't work with it directly, it was like a child organization that they were doing autonomous racing cars, right? Have you seen, it's called RoboRace,
Okay.
right? So they had an incredibly beautiful machine that they've built. It was designed by this like legendary designer, and it looked insane. And inside there was like a big NVIDIA computer that was like doing trillions of calculations of like speed and velocity and like turbulence and all these things. Autonomous racing, right? This thing goes around the track, beats all the records, is able to go to speeds that are like not possible to sustain by a human, the G forces or whatever, right? It never took off.
Why?
It never, like, why do you think?
Because there's no human there.
Exactly.
It's boring.
It's boring.
Yeah.
Like,
He's watching.
I mean, it's like, I don't want to say. I feel like I'll do injustice to the people that work there and people who enjoyed watching it or like had really put a lot of stakes on it. And like, it was a big thing. We were like, had a whole autonomous like race car event, and it was streamed on television, like online and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the system that improves the human. Like, we watched Formula One finals today, right?
Yeah.
Max Verstappen did it again.
Big boy. Supermax.
And, it's always the systems that improve the human, because there's so many systems inside that. Like, that Formula One car is not, it exists to enable Max Verstappen to drive the way he does. As soon as you try to get Verstappen out of that seat, the whole system breaks. Like, the whole concept breaks, right? Because technology is never about technology. Technology is always about the human. At the end of the day, like, if you give me an example of anything, I will link it. Like, anything successful, I will be able to link it to a human that is enabled by it.
No, I think So I think you're right in a lot of aspects there. But I think now, I don't know if I agree with it 100%. Because, Boston Dynamics. Look what they're doing.
What are they doing?
They're doing these autonomous robots that can go around crazy terrains and do crazy shit. They're going to be able to go into burning buildings a lot better than humans are very soon.
I would push back and disagree, because the best system, if we're talking about like search and rescue, it's a huge, like in robotics, search and rescue is a huge, huge field. It's almost like a Philosopher's Stone kind of magic wand that you can always go back to. Like, let's say you found no applications of your research, you could always be like, it's gonna be useful in search and rescue, and it will be like accepted in IEEE.
In IEEE. No hate on IEEE. I've referenced loads of your papers, by the way.
Best journal in the world.
Well, because they'll publish anything.
Public, yeah, no, they're like different topic, but I think there was like a statistic on all publishers, and like IEEE is always at the top of like just the volume of papers that they publish. Anyway, if we're talking about the functional aspects of search and rescue, it will never be an autonomous system. Like, it will always be a system. The best system for search and rescue or burning buildings will always be some sort of something that enables the firefighter to do a better job. It will never be an autonomous system that goes and deploys and whatever.
So you're saying there always has to be a human in the loop.
Because that's the best way to do things. It's like evolutionary. It will, and I think.
Do you not think though, with like the way neural networks and things are going now, and like for example, Safwan, who you know from EF, him and his friends went to. They tried doing a startup in Pakistan, if I remember correctly, where they automated chest X-rays, and the AI, the machine learning algorithm stuff that they written was predicting like 97% accuracy, something mental. It was like more accurate than humans. Like,
Yeah.
I understand that's only one part of the process. I understand that's only deciphering the results of a chest X-ray. I get that. But they wrote code in a few months and deployed it in Pakistan, in hospitals in Pakistan, where the results were more accurate than humans.
Yeah, I'm not saying sophisticated tools don't exist. The ones that take away a lot of human labor and skill to like be able to identify a tumor on an X-ray. But maybe I'm cheating in my argument that, like, for example, I'd say, well, that system exists to kind of aid the physician.
No question. Yeah.
It's like impenetrable argument that I will always be able to kind of link it to that person, even though sometimes it wouldn't make sense to do that. But I would still say that exists for the physician. Like, that tool is just enables the physicians to do a better job. It's not an end-to-end autonomous system.
But do you not see a future in which that code is incorporated into a larger set where the person just sits on a bed, presses a button, X-ray occurs, it knows where to X-ray, tells the person, sit on your left, sit on your right, you know what I mean? Give me a posterior and anterior image, whatever. Churns out the data, spits it out, and then figures out this person within seconds needs to go here, and a light pops up and goes, go to this place, and then that whole part of just I know maybe they'll have to go to another referral or they'll have to go see another doctor, but why can't that happen? And then the next step gets autonomized, gets automated. And then the previous step is as well. Like, what's stopping that?
Okay, no, I'm saying, well, the funny thing is, if we got the actual cardiologist, or not cardiologist, who is Dom Pimenta?
He's a GP.
He's a physician,
he's a doctor.
right?
He's a
So, if we got him on, he would definitely say that no matter how sophisticated your like analysis, it's at the end more than just compute. Like,
Yeah.
it's the doctor who makes the difference here.
No question.
Even if I was to make a one button click, that's only part of the process, and a lot of that will be the relationship of the patient with the physician, the trust, the human aspect is the most important one, and everything else is secondary. So like that's what I always will think. Like,
because I remember one of the things that got me into startups was I did a startup course with a spin out company called Spin Up Science that are based in Bristol, and what they're trying to do is and I'll plug them now. Actually, Spin Up Science with Ben Miles. Check him out on LinkedIn. Spin Up Science, really good guys. They basically, he was part of a startup that was developing glucose fluorescence. So it's like you put a marker in the blood, it binds to glucose, and then you can live track people's diabetes, sugar levels. So you've literally got second by second analysis of where the blood sugar levels are, which is just so important for things like surgery, because people go hypo on the table where the blood sugar goes too level, and that's when they get comatose. But if you don't finger prick them every 10 minutes, then you know what I mean, you can't find the dips all the time. Anyway, so he was the CTO or something of them. Left, they ended up exiting for like 800 mil, something to GSK, I think. Anyway, so he spanned this company out because he was like, London's got a very good startup scene, Cambridge and Oxford had a very good startup scene, but he was like, Bristol, I was one of a few, and the North just doesn't have a startup scene. There's no startup infrastructure or ecosystem, whatever. I remember, so he came to Liverpool, did this thing. It was free for me, like the uni paid for it. And it was a week-long immersive course where they actually give us a real life problem. It was like a guy came to us and he was like pro with robotics, made the first ever autonomous chemistry experiment and it was done in Liverpool, where it was like you just program it with things to do and it does it 24 hours a day. And he came being like, I've got this, I can do this with robots, so give us a week. And he was like, churn something out for me at the end of the week, like what I can do with it. And it was a week-long thing, so I had to do that market. We had to do like ideation, market validation, and then we had to pitch at the end. I remember one of the things for me that I got really hell-bent about was like, one of the ideas was using these robotic arms that he got very good at scripting up to do basic cooking things. Like, you know, you've seen in Japan now, like the omelette maker. You know, like it's fucking phenomenal. It's madness. Perfect omelette every time. I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I really pushed back on it because we were talking about like making pokeballs or something, you know. Can we get a robotic arm to do these things and just make it super easy? And I remember thinking like, I don't like this. It's replacing a human. It's replacing a human. I was like, I don't like it. That's someone out of a job. But then I was just like, this is innovation. You can't stop innovation. Like, markets change. Think about it. The first person who moved from ox to run the plow to using a steam engine to plow the fields or whatever it is, you know what I mean? An actual like combustion engine to plow the fields. I put livestock out of a job. But then the person that ran the tractor now, that would take 10 people to do it, whatever. Now they've got combine harvesters. The market always changes, isn't it? I think I've gone away from what we were saying originally, but I was used to be like mad against the idea that like moving humans out of it is a bad idea. But I don't think you can get away from it. I think machines are more reliable than humans when you get it right.
At the end of the day, the humans will always be there. Like, that's how I see it. If the human, the most successful thing, like evolution will make it so that whatever you design, the human will always be there to be in the loop. And those are the best systems. That's always how it works. The combine, now, instead of being like the person who carries the yoke, you are now the technician for the robotic system that carries the yoke. So like it with time, the only thing that will stay true, no matter how many people change industries and skill sets, the humans will always be there.
So here's an example then where I think very soon there might not be. Tesco groceries. They have now automated grocery packing. So have you seen, they have one in London, forget where it is, down in London, where massive warehouse with every single item, and it's just an array of robots. Mm-hmm. I put the grocery list I've got going in now to be packed tonight and sent tomorrow. Put it in online, no humans, just me. I put my order in. Yeah. That goes through an internet system, gets compiled, whatever. The warehouse in London packs it all using robots. The only part of the human aspect, I assume, is to check it and to drive the groceries to me. Well, Amazon are working on driverless cars and driverless delivery systems soon. Surely, very soon, we're going to have a situation where I'll be able to order my shopping list on my phone and no humans are needed. As in, the only humans are going to be needed are just going to watch over it.
Yeah, I think that's a big argument. It's been brought up a lot. I think there's a good video about it. It's called "Humans Need Not Apply."
Yes, humans need. That's old though. That's very
yeah.
old. That's like
8 years old.
Yeah,
or
8 years
something.
old. Yeah. That's a.
It's like a long, long debate, and this sets us up for the next one. But I just do not see that happening. I just really, with adaptation, with the way we are, with the way things work, we will always be there to kind of. We'll change careers. It'll be not groceries. It will be something else.
Yeah.
But those 1,000 people that got out of a job, they will be part of a system eventually in one way or another.
Well, I think we're singing from the same hymn sheet then.
Hymn sheet.
We're saying the same thing in that sense, but from different angles.
I think we'll end it there as well then.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
I
me.
enjoyed that. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoy.
0008 with Dr. Daniel Bromley.
Not yet. Soon.